Tonight, the Democratic Party's choice for vice president takes center stage.
When we Democrats talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make a better life for yourself and the people that you love.
Tim Walz revs up the crowd in Chicago. Railway workers and their two companies take contract negotiations right down to the wire.
The country has no patience with dilly-dallying right now.
And scientists and a remote First Nation team up for a nutrition revolution.
Tastes more healthy, more natural.
A new project tackles a long-standing health challenge.
From CBC News, this is The National with Chief Correspondent Adrian Arsenault.
Thanks for joining us. We start with breaking news tonight that could have a significant impact across this country. Thousands of workers at Canada's two largest railway companies have just been locked out, an unprecedented work stoppage. So after the passing of a midnight Eastern deadline, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City ordered lockouts. Already, pickets are coming up in Vancouver and Calgary. Work stoppages have never occurred at those railways at the same time. So to sort this out, let's bring in Anis Hadari, who is following the story for us. So Anis, with the talks having just broken down, what precisely do we know at this hour?
We know that around 9,300 workers between both Canadian Pacific Kansas City and Canadian National are locked out at this point. The companies and the same union for both, the Teamsters, they've clearly been unable to come to a deal after a really long and fractious bargaining process. At some points, both sides couldn't even agree on what they disagreed about. The union said CPKC wanted to weaken rules protecting workers from fatigue, but the company said its offers didn't compromise safety. The Teamsters said CN wanted more power to order workers to relocate across Canada, but the company said that relocation would be voluntary. The federal government had rejected demands from both of the railways and from business groups to eliminate even the possibility of this labor dispute by forcing both sides into binding arbitration. But earlier today, the federal labor minister said absolutely not to that. Now, the Teamsters have said they remain at the bargaining table, but at the same time, all of their workers are locked out, Adrian.
Okay, so that's the story of the workers, but Anis, the impacts of this will be felt in so many ways by Canadians everywhere. Can you walk through what they should expect in the morning?
Yeah, this is a massive railway disruption. In the short term, more than 30,000 commuters on certain lines in Vancouver, Toronto, and Montreal may not be able to grab their train of choice because some of those passenger trains operate on lines that need CPKC staff. Via Rail loses a route through Sudbury. Businesses are going to find shipping very seized up in the morning. Half of all Canadian exports take the train in some fashion. And it's pretty critical for goods at home, too. On top of consumer products like, let's say, foods, chlorine, which is needed for drinking water treatment, moves by rail, and it cannot move by truck or by ship. There are estimates that the economic damage is tens of millions of dollars each day. If this is only a short dispute, businesses might be able to make up for that once it's resolved. But the longer this lockout, the heavier the damage. And it's really hard to estimate what that would be because, as you mentioned, we've never seen both CN and CP off the job at the same time, Adrian.
And presumably a one-day stoppage doesn't take one day to resolve. So this could pile on a bit.
Yeah.
All right, Anis Hadari watching this for us in Calgary tonight. Well, it was day 3 of the Democratic National Convention, and tonight, for the first time, the keynote address came from someone on the Democratic ticket itself, Vice Presidential nominee Tim Walz.
Thank you, first of all, to Vice President Harris. Thanks for putting your trust in me and for inviting me to be part of this incredible campaign.
It was many Americans' introduction to Walz, the governor of Minnesota, former school teacher, assistant football coach, Army National Guard veteran, and now Kamala Harris's running mate. So we have full coverage tonight from Chicago with analysis from Paul Hunter and Katie Simpson on what happened on that big stage. So that's where we will start. Katie, let's talk about the keynote speaker, Tim Walz.
This was Tim Walz's chance to introduce himself to Americans, and he presented himself as your friendly neighbor, the high school football coach everyone knows and likes. It was all very carefully choreographed, as these things are at a political convention. Just before he went out to speak, they gave everyone in the audience these big, huge things that say Coach Walz, these big, huge signs. And so as soon as he stepped out onto that stage, everyone was waving those flags and those signs in the air. And at times, people were chanting, Coach, Coach, Coach. Tim Walz used his own life story and his own life experiences as a teacher, as a coach, as someone who served in the Army National Guard, to try and relate it to the things and the values that Democrats want to fight for in this election, the things that they say are at risk in this election. The theme of the night, freedom, talking about reproductive freedom, the right to choose how and when you start your family, the freedom to love who you love, advocating for progressive LGBTQ rights, talking about some of the changes, progressive changes as well, that he brought to the school system in Minnesota as serving as governor, making sure, that kids get free lunch and free breakfast, those kinds of things, making them this really a values statement. And he leaned into it in his folksy Midwestern way with that friendly neighbor analogy.
We also protected reproductive freedom because in Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. And even if we wouldn't make those same choices for ourselves, we've got a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
There were a couple of standout moments when Tim Walz talked about how he loved his family, thanking his daughter and son and wife, and the camera cut away to Tim Walz's son standing there crying. Those are some of the moments that are starting to get that early traction on social media. That's exactly what Democrats want. They want him to come across as a kind, loving father, a friendly football coach, and that neighbor that you want to get to know.
Those images of Gus Walz jumping up and saying, "That's my dad, that's my dad." You're going to see that for days on social media. If you get a chance, check it out. It's an interesting, spontaneous, authentic moment there. Katie, Walz closed out the night, certainly not the only big name on the stage.
No, and that, of course, was Oprah Winfrey, former talk show host who does not need an introduction. She made a direct appeal to independent voters, saying now is the time to vote your conscience. She said she's an independent voter and that morals and values are on the ballot. She also took a shot at J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's running mate, turning his own words against him.
When a house is on fire, we don't ask about the homeowner's race or religion. We don't wonder who their partner is or how they voted. No, we just try to do the best we can to save them. And if the place happens to belong to a childless cat lady, well, we try to get that cat out too.
Taking J.D. Vance's words about women and childless women, taking them and using them against him. And that is what we heard tonight and we'll likely hear again tomorrow.
All right, Katie Simpson in Chicago. So now let's go to Paul Hunter. Paul, the buzz Tim Walz has been generating both on the campaign trail and tonight with that speech, I mean, this is not exactly normal for a running mate.
No, it's not. And tonight we got a sense of why there's that buzz. Look, this is a guy who, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, nobody outside of Minnesota or the political class in this country had really heard of. I'm overstating it a little bit, obviously, but by and large, he's come out of nowhere. And already his brand is an important one for the Harris campaign. And that's a normal guy, a guy who isn't weird, to borrow that word from him. A guy in a role now where there's also kind of a requirement to sometimes take on the role of pit bull, to go after the opponents in a way sometimes the presidential candidate cannot. He's got to be a lot of things. We know about his resume in the National Guard, and he was a congressman in Washington. He was a teacher, he was a football coach. And speaking of football coaches, Adrian, he played that tonight. The crowd had the signs they were carrying said Coach Walz. How American dad-ish does that get, for one, if that's part of the brand they want to portray with Tim Walz? But he spoke to that in one of his many attempts to rile people up, to as he would say it, jack people up. Let's give a listen to a clip from him tonight.
You know, you might not know it, but I haven't given a lot of big speeches like this. But I have given a lot of pep talks. So let me finish with this, team. It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team.
So aiming at firing people up, but, regular guy, America's dad, football coach, that's the kind of thing that I think has attracted Tim Walz to the Harris people.
And interesting, that one of the biggest cheers of the night for him was when he said, never underestimate a public school teacher. That will connect with a lot of Americans, as will everything he said about the crushing weight of medical debt, only going to school because of the GI Bill. It sounds like part of the Democratic strategy is to have people, independents, even Republicans, say, that guy's just like my dad. That guy's just like me, sort of thing.
Yeah, while making the case that Democrats have to make. They've got to make the case for the things that we've heard so much from Kamala Harris, for positivity and optimism and joy and forward-looking, but also got to make the case against Donald Trump. And I suspect we'll hear from Walz a lot on that. He was strong against Donald Trump tonight, as we heard from Bill Clinton, as we heard from Michelle Obama and others. But that role to push back hard, to punch Donald Trump in the nose with words, will be Walz's role going down to November 5th. And we heard a good chunk of that tonight from him on stage.
When I was teaching every year, we'd elect a student body president. And you know what? Those teenagers could teach Donald Trump a hell of a lot about what a leader is. Leaders don't spend all day insulting people and blaming others. Leaders do the work.
Regular talk, Adrian. Again, and a word that we've used a lot lately, authenticity, I think, is what Democrats want to see in their candidates, and I believe that is what he exudes. It was a strong performance on stage, I think, by measure of the crowd in this room, the bubble in this room, in fairness, but it played very well in this arena tonight.
Interesting. All right. Paul Hunter, so grateful to you, also in Chicago with us. So we've got more on tonight's headline speech. Our U.S. political panel will break it all down a little later in the hour. Now, while the Democrats continued to celebrate Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the Republican ticket was back on the hustings.
They've done a terrible job for our country in every single way.
Surrounded by panes of bulletproof glass, Donald Trump held his first outdoor rally since being injured in last month's assassination attempt. Joined by J.D. Vance, Trump blamed Joe Biden and his vice president for the deadly Afghanistan withdrawal and for the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East. And U.S. President Joe Biden spoke with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu today about ongoing ceasefire talks, as more calls for a deal come from people in both Israel and Gaza. As you're about to see, it's been a deadly last few days. Chris Brown shows us the anguish and the fury.
In Niroz, family and friends buried 79-year-old Avraham Munder. His was one of 6 bodies recovered in Gaza by Israel's military, though whether it was Hamas or Israel's attacks that killed them, likely back in March, is undetermined. With hopes for a ceasefire again possibly slipping away, many here blame Israel for not trying hard enough to bring the roughly 100 remaining hostages home,
as you see,
including Izhar Lipshitz's father.
They want to win the war, they want to kill the Hamas. Sometimes you have to say, okay, enough is enough.
Munder's nephew said not rescuing his uncle is a betrayal by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
There were multiple chances to sign a deal and to rescue the ones that you could rescue.
Israel's prime minister said all of the war objectives will be achieved, including that Gaza is never again a security threat. But in Han Yunis Wednesday, many of the 50 victims of Israel's latest airstrikes were children. Some of their gruesome injuries, including small, headless bodies, are just too horrendous to show. Did they finish off Hamas? They didn't finish off Hamas. They finished off our children, he said. Elsewhere, tens of thousands of people have been ordered to leave Deir al-Balah as one of the few Israel-designated safe areas. It had become a hub for humanitarian efforts. Every day they promise us negotiations, but it's all lies on lies on lies, said Amhani Zakut. The U.S., Israel, and Hamas are all leaking their versions of what's preventing a truce, including Israeli demands to keep a military presence in Gaza and to simply pause the fighting rather than end it permanently. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
The RCMP and multiple police forces are investigating tonight after bomb threats were sent to Jewish organizations across the country. Police say more than 100 institutions received an email this morning threatening explosions.
This isn't just a threat to the Jewish community. This is an affront to Canadian morals and values. This is an attack on the very well-being of Canadian society.
Police say they found no evidence of any explosives. The Prime Minister said he was disgusted and called the incident blatant anti-Semitism. Well, Taylor Swift is speaking out for the first time since the cancellation of her Vienna concerts due to a foiled terror plot. In a statement, the singer said she felt devastated. She gave credit to authorities, saying, "Thanks to them, we were grieving concerts, not lives." Swift says she's only commenting now because she wanted to prioritize safety while her European tour leg was ongoing. Now, as we told you last night, Ontario will close more than half of its supervised drug consumption sites. But newly revealed public documents suggest the decision defied the advice of the province's own experts. Mike Crawley has been following this story.
Vanessa Tukane says this supervised drug consumption site in Thunder Bay, Ontario, saved her life twice.
And a couple times that I've been there, I've overdosed. And when I think about, had I not been there, I wouldn't be alive.
The site is one of 10 the Ontario government is shutting down.
I just really can't get over how many people are not going to make it as a result of it closing.
The closure largely stems from a tragedy that happened more than 1,300 kilometers away. A mother shot and killed last summer as she walked by a supervised consumption site in Toronto. The province ordered a review of the program. The report delivered by experts calls it a necessary public health service and recommends expanding supervised consumption sites in Ontario, not closing them.
It'll be one question, one follow-up.
A reporter asks Ontario's premier why he ignored the expert advice.
And I was just wondering how you would feel if I stuck one of these beside your house. You wouldn't like it. Matter of fact, I know you wouldn't like it, neither would your neighbors and neither would anyone else. And all the kids, they shouldn't be by schools, they shouldn't be by daycares.
The 10 sites Ontario is closing are all within 200 meters of a school or childcare facility. The Ford government is not allowing them to relocate.
If you're not going to create a pathway by which these services can become compliant, then it's really just a pretext.
While people living around the sites complain of used needles and discarded syringes, advocates like Dan Werb argue shutting them down won't help.
This will likely lead to higher levels of public drug use.
Ontario is promising to create 19 new addiction treatment hubs, which won't allow consumption. That makes experts question whether addicts will be willing to use them. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Quebec is racing against time to fill thousands of teaching positions with just days until school is back in session.
We have a shortage of support in the classrooms, and we have a shortage of respect.
Why some educators say they're being driven away. We're back in 2. One of the best Canadian baseball players of all time is calling it a career.
That's it. I'm done. I am officially retired from baseball.
And that is Joey Votto hanging them up in a 9-second Instagram post. The 6-time MLB All-Star also wrote a message thanking fans with a touch of humor, saying, "I'm just not good anymore." Votto played his entire Major League career with the Cincinnati Reds, though the Toronto native also suited up for the Blue Jays in spring training earlier this year. Quebec's new school year begins next week, but thousands of teachers are still needed to fill vacancies. As Vanessa Lee shows us, an additional 20,000 students in the system is adding even more pressure.
A last-minute hiring blitz on Montreal's South Shore as school boards scramble to make sure there are enough teachers and support staff when students return next week.
Last Friday, we had 5,700 jobs to be filled.
Quebec's education minister says they've hired 1,900 teachers in the past week. 3,800 vacancies still need to be filled.
We're still moving closer to our objective, which is to have one teacher per classroom for the new school year.
The province says there are 20,000 more students enrolled this year, mostly new immigrants. Quebec is currently home to half of asylum seekers in Canada, putting strain on a system that is already stretched. Fewer and fewer teachers are staying in the profession.
At some point, I had to say enough's enough.
Longtime social studies teacher Nathalie Bertrand just resigned from the public system. She says the stress and uncertainty of assignments has taken a toll.
6 schools in the last 10 years. So the impact it had on me was that every year it's like moving into a new house and having a new boss and learning a new situation.
The retention and recruitment crisis isn't new, nor is it unique to Quebec. The Canadian Teachers Federation says the shortage isn't necessarily because of salary.
That we actually have a shortage of good working conditions, we have a shortage of support in the classrooms, and we have a shortage of respect.
In Quebec, there are fears it may be even harder now to make up for lost time after COVID and a 5-week teacher strike.
During summer school, it was a record number of children that went to summer school.
The tally of 3,800 unfilled positions does not include missing support staff. The education minister says the number of unqualified teachers in the classroom won't be known until October. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
Well, Tim Walz has officially accepted the Democratic vice presidential nomination. In just a few minutes, our panel will break down what he said and what's at stake. A First Nation in northern Manitoba is teaming up with researchers to grow healthier vegetables. It's a smart farm pilot project. And as Karen Paul shows us, the goal is to fight health issues like diabetes.
So these are broccoli sprouts. These are actually.
This sci-fi looking lab is what's known as a vertical smart farm.
We grow up to day 10, harvest, and then package, ship down to Winnipeg.
And there's no soil?
No.
Full spectrum LED lights mimic sunshine.
Just gonna water these guys, give them
Artificial intelligence controls temperature, moisture, carbon dioxide, and nutrient levels.
So they're looking at different wavelengths and different times of growth to see when is the best time to harvest them so that they will be the most nutritious.
Yes, that's correct.
Researchers have found stimulating production of specific compounds in vegetables, like potassium and manganese, makes these veggies more nutritious than grocery store produce.
Typically 2 times to 11 times higher, right? Especially the manganese was very high. Then they can consume much less, but they still same benefits.
Almost half of the adult population in this remote northern community is suffering from type 2 diabetes. Leaders say there's an average of 3 diabetes-related deaths every month. And part of the challenge is encouraging people to cook and eat these smart vegetables.
I'll be honest, the first 4 months of working here, I didn't really eat the product because I was scared of it. There's a lot of stigma that we were met with. People were like, oh, it's artificial, it's fake food.
So, food scientists developed recipes, cooked them, and brought a meal to the local shopping mall.
Would you like to try some chili with kale? You don't notice it that much. And then we just have some sage and kale cornbread muffins.
tastes more healthy, more natural. That's what I think.
Have you ever eaten kale before?
I don't even know what that is.
Kale, first time trying that, and with everything else, it's great.
Do you think you might cook with this more often?
Yes, for sure.
The goal is to educate people on how smart veggies contribute to a healthy diet and ultimately save lives. Karen Pauls, CBC News, Opaskwayak Cree Nation, Manitoba.
Now let's break down the latest from the Democratic National Convention.
Now, I grew up in Butte, Nebraska, a town of 400 people. I had 24 kids in my high school class, and none of them went to Yale.
Tim Walz, the U.S. vice presidential candidate, introducing himself to American voters, a man few probably knew much about outside of Minnesota. Did he deliver what voters expected of him? Brian Stelter, Tia Mitchell, and certainly Paul Hunter, you have all seen a lot, and I am so curious if we could start with you, Tia, because you are right there. You saw Tim Walz's big moment in person. Can you put us on the floor there for that experience?
So it was so interesting when the speech started. They had passed out these Coach Walz signs in the crowd, and so the crowd was chanting "Coach, Coach, Coach," and that's such a big theme throughout his speech. Again, he talked about being a coach, mentoring children, being a public school teacher, and then that closing pep talk. And you could tell he went into coach mode when he told Democrats, hey, you can sleep when you die. It's time to work right now. It's time to, get the Harris-Walz ticket elected, as he said. But I'll be honest, Gus Walz has stolen the show.
You bet.
The emotion he showed, the love and pride he had for his father tonight, I think that spoke even bigger volumes than anything Tim Walz said. Yes, he knocked his speech out of the park. He did what he was supposed to do. The crowd was behind him. They ate up every word, and he got some good lines in. But nothing speaks better than having a son, a teenage son at that, who is in tears because he's watching his dad and is so visibly proud.
Isn't that the story of everything authentic, though? You can plan everything, but a moment is a moment, and it happens when it feels like it, and that's what people latch onto. I think, Brian, obviously one of the things Tim Walz likes to talk about is his family's existence, his family's experience with fertility issues. He intentionally has made this personal, top issue for Democrats this election year. So let's have a little bit of a listen to that.
In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. And even if we wouldn't make those same choices for ourselves, we've got a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. And that includes IVF and fertility treatments. And this is personal for Gwen and I. It took Gwen and I years, but we had access to fertility treatments. And when our daughter was born, we named her Hope. Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world.
Brian, he went on to say later that governments need to stay the hell out of people's bedrooms. Canadians will probably recognize a statement like that. Certainly, it was one that was made by Pierre Elliott Trudeau, version of that a long time ago. This issue is something the Harris-Walz campaign have been hammering the Trump campaign on. How effective is this message?
I think it's very effective for the following reason. Most voters are thinking about their own families when they decide to vote, right? Most voters are thinking about how these candidates will impact their own families. And right now, this topic about IVF is very, very visible. My children are IVF babies, and when they were conceived, I did not view IVF as political. but it was. And right now it's very politicized. Right now on the hard right, there are efforts to pull back and reverse some of these fertility advancements. And so for millions of families, when they hear about IVF or other fertility treatments being at risk, they take it very seriously. This is an opportunity for Democrats to embrace that word freedom. It's a word the Republicans usually try to own, the word freedom. And that's what you see Tim Walz doing, owning the word freedom, talking about privacy also. Really interesting combination there, right? Stay out of my bedroom, mind your own damn business. These are libertarian phrases, conservative phrases that Walz is trying to own from the left. He's also trying to own the idea of decency and family. And one more word that you and Tia touched on, just plain on love, basic love, because a lot of people look at Donald Trump and his family and they don't see a family that they can relate to, right? The Trumps are very rich. They have lots of mansions. They live in a different orbit. What you're seeing from Walz and tomorrow Kamala Harris, you're seeing a different kind of familial love. And that may or may not resonate with voters.
Does this, Paul, the image of him and the appeal of him to Democratic voters, does this appeal to Trump voters? I mean, he took direct aim at Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. I'm wondering if that lands. And why don't we just play a little bit of that?
Some folks just don't understand what it takes to be a good neighbor. Take Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Their Project 2025 will make things much, much harder for people who are just trying to live their lives. They spent a lot of time pretending they know nothing about this. But look, I coached high school football long enough to know, and trust me on this, when somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're going to use it.
Paul, what do you think? Is what he said something that could sway independents, even maybe Republicans?
Well, we'll find out, is the short answer. But let me throw another word out. Listen to the words that Brian and Tia have been using that come to mind after that speech, and that's authenticity. And the kind of language that he was using, and some of it was evident in that clip, damn, hell, the kinds of words that Joe Biden used, but I think certainly in recent years there seemed, I think it's fair to say, a performative aspect to Joe Biden when he was trying to talk regular talk. This speech tonight, complete with more football metaphors than I've ever heard in my life, I think, but it played well here. It played well here. The Coach Walz signs that they handed out and that were held up. Does it get more American than that? Does it get more like regular guy American than that? And so to the question, does that appeal to Republicans? We're not talking the hardcore MAGA people, but who knows? But those regular people who understand Friday Night Lights and all that comes with football, but also that regular speak. He didn't come across, I think it's fair to say, like a politician. He made a lot of political points, but he talked like a guy, like a dude, like a coach, like a teacher, like a National Guardsman. Like all these things that are positives for him seemed to come across tonight. And I'm telling you, Tia was saying he knocked it out of the park. It's rare is the speaker who can upstage Bill Clinton, right? Clinton's getting on in years, in fairness, but based on the vibe here, there's a word we've been using so much lately as well. It played super well here, and in theory, that should play well to those Republicans in that soft middle that we talk about, the people that I was saying earlier that Adam Kinzinger might say this kind of stuff gives permission for them to vote Democrat this time, potentially.
I mean, I do remember, though, Paul, not that long ago when we were talking about the RNC and after J.D. Vance spoke and talked about the effect of the drug crisis on his family and that community and understanding what it was like to grow up struggling. I mean, we almost had exactly the same conversation that was a speech that might present him in a way that would appeal to people in those swing states, certainly along that Rust Belt. It seems like there's a parallel here in the strategies. I'm not suggesting that for either one of these people, this was like politically constructed. It just seems to be who they are.
Fair point. And I would point out another aspect of what we got glimpses of tonight from Tim Walz, which is his deafness with politics. So he threw in the Yale reference, which debunks a little bit of the sort of Rust Beltiness of J.D. Vance. There's more to J.D. Vance than simply hillbilly elegy. And Walz has made that point before. He will certainly make it many times in the weeks to come. But he got that little dig in there tonight just to draw a little bit of separation from the story that J.D. Vance put forth in that book and film, and that he puts on the campaign trail. Again, signaling Tim Walz knows what he's doing on a stage. He knows how to be a regular guy, but he also knows how to do politics.
Yep. And they are acutely aware of the concerns about policy. We've been talking about this a little bit, Tia, right? That at some point you move from the vibes to the policies. And he was like, all right, clip and paste this. Kamala Harris is going to go after the pharmaceutical, big pharma. What's the effectiveness, do you think, of that likely to be to say, okay, you've met us, now here's what we're going to do?
Yeah, I mean, and I think both Harris and Walz have said there is more to come. We know that they've been moving fast with a campaign that basically didn't exist roughly a month ago, and they had immediately turned to picking a running mate, did that, and then immediately turned to this convention, and they've got one more night. But they've said more is to come, and I think it's got to come. They have no choice because they now have debates they have to prepare for, and they're not going to be able to control the questions they are asked, but they know the ramifications if they don't have good answers to those questions. So I think there is talk of policy in every speech that Harris and Walz have given, including tonight with Governor Walz. I think it's just not super detailed right now, and that's where some of the criticism is coming from.
We have very little time left, so Brian, I just want to throw this last one to you. Tomorrow night, Kamala Harris, what does she need to do?
She needs to portray herself not as Joe Biden's vice president, not as someone who's already been in charge for the past 3.5 years, but actually as the insurgent, as the outsider, who is part of an American sweep of history, a historical figure moving toward America's better angels. That's what I think she's going to do. Even as she acknowledges Biden, she's going to say, I'm not Biden. I am a new figure of a new generation. And most importantly, she's going to say, I'm not Donald Trump. Because let's be honest, that's what most Democrats care about most, just making sure Trump's not reelected.
Brian Stelter, Tia Mitchell, Paul Hunter, it is such a privilege to watch this with you. Thank you very, very much.
You too.
I feel like we'll be talking again tomorrow night.
Turn out for what? Turn out for what?
Okay, let's change the tempo a little bit because that's Little John turning roll call into a dance party yesterday with the electors from Georgia, just one of the battleground states which could help determine the election. We will have more ahead with our special coverage of the Democratic National Convention. A reinvigorated Democratic Party, buoyed by a fresh new leader.
The next president of the United States of America, Kamala Harris.
The political torch passed, but the real work has just begun.
No pressure. The future of the nation is riding on you.
As the Dems turn their focus to key battleground races on the way to the White House. Ellen Morrow joins us now. So, Ellen, Kamala Harris has certainly energized Democrats, but can you break down for us specifically how her nomination changes the race for the Oval Office?
Well, Adrienne, part of the reason Democrats are just so excited right now is because Kamala Harris has opened up more paths to victory than they had a few weeks ago. Now, remember, it all comes down to who can get 270 electoral college votes. Each state has a certain number of votes, and before any ballots are cast, it's a safe bet how most of the states are going to go. So really, the entire election comes down to these 7 key battleground states that we have in gray here. Now, just to talk about each of them more specifically, we'll start with Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. We talk a lot about those, part of the American Rust Belt, the industrial heartland. Now, when Joe Biden was the candidate, this was the only path to victory for the Democrats. They were going to have to hold on to every single one of those states, and that was looking tough according to the polls. Now, with Kamala Harris, there's a bit more wiggle room for the Democrats. Of course, they still want to win these states, particularly Pennsylvania with its 19 electoral college votes. And polling has shown that Kamala Harris has closed the gap in all 3 of these states. But they do have a bit more wiggle room. There is a bit of pressure off them in the Rust Belt now, and that's because the Sun Belt swing states are all of a sudden now back in play, which they weren't a few weeks ago. So we're talking about places like North Carolina and Georgia in the East. Georgia is a big one. Biden won it narrowly in 2020, but Democrats were considering it to be a lost cause this time around. Same with North Carolina. Trump won it in 2020 and 2016. It's Republican leaning. But now polls show a neck-and-neck race in both of those states. One poll even had Kamala Harris leading in North Carolina. It's a similar story when we look to the west in Nevada and Arizona. Harris has also closed the gap in those states as well. Biden won those states narrowly in 2020, but Donald Trump was beating him in the polls. So all of a sudden, in just a few weeks, we're looking at an entirely different race. Kamala Harris gaining ground in places where Joe Biden was struggling, and those leads that Donald Trump had now shrinking, in some cases polling having Kamala Harris ahead, Adrienne.
So that's interesting about the states. Can you take us through the individual voters within those states who are the ones giving her a better chance?
Well, Kamala Harris has made big gains with voters that Democrats need to win. So let's start by looking at Black support. We can show you the latest polling from the New York Times showing Kamala Harris has an 84% support level among Black voters. That's a 10% jump from what Joe Biden had when he was still the candidate. And that really matters in those key states of North Carolina and Georgia, where Black voters are about a third of the electorate. Now, that same poll from the New York Times also looked at Hispanic voter support, specifically in Arizona and Nevada, finding a significant lead for Harris over Donald Trump among Hispanic voters in those states. She's doing much better than Biden was. And that's important because Hispanic voters are about 20% of voters in Nevada and Arizona. Other polling nationally and in these swing states is showing Kamala Harris doing much better among women than Joe Biden was, and also picking up a lot of support among young voters. One poll had her 20 points ahead of Donald Trump among young voters. So things are looking up for the Democrats, but a few key points to make. One, polling still says that voters say the economy and immigration are their 2 most important issues, and Trump tends to poll better on those 2 issues. Some voters say they're still getting to know Kamala Harris. Polls are a snapshot in time. They have been wrong before. And of course, Adrienne, we are still just in August. There is still a very long way to go.
Absolutely. And Democrats are constantly reminding themselves that Donald Trump outperforms the polls. Exactly. Ellen Morrow, thank you.
You're welcome.
Up next, a whale with a warm welcome.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh, you're so big.
A close encounter in our moment. So you're looking at Cork, a female adult humpback whale making herself known as she swims in the Bay of Fundy between Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. So Cork apparently decided to stop by, give some tour boat passengers their money's worth, and tonight her surprise greeting is our moment.
Oh my God. Oh, you're so big.
Close approaches like that are always incredibly special.
She's right under the water.
She came right towards us and underneath our stern and came up on the other side.
Hi, baby girl.
It's not common. Whales are here in the Bay of Fundy to feed, and that's really what's on their mind most of the time. Saying that, there's certain individuals that can be more curious than others. Whether she was curious or on her way in that direction, she's a really special whale to me. I've been watching her for the past 20 years, and I got very emotional when she came quite close like that. So I'd like to say she was a little curious and came over. If a whale surfaces close to you and especially if they're approaching the boat, the best thing you can do is stay where you are. It was a very special experience.
And of course, that whale's name, they call her Cork because of a little mark she has that looks like a wine cork. And given that they can live for some 80 or 90 years, they expect to see her a lot more in the future. For all of us here at The National, thank you for being with us. You can watch anywhere, anytime on the free CBC News app and subscribe to The National's YouTube channel. I'm Adrienne Arsenault. Take care.